My business name, Amy, comes from being a realtor in the Bay Area. It's actually Amy Edo Realty. I am also a tenant here at the Live Work, Emery Live Work. I own a salon of 20 years, 20 plus years. I lost count. But I also organize the Merchants Association, and I'm honored to be here today. And hopefully, we can activate some new initiatives and bring awareness to some things that need addressing.
My name is Kalima Pryforce. I am a resident of Emeryville for, I believe, 14, 15 years. I am the city council member, and I was elected in 2022. And I focus a lot on tenant issues, on small business issues. Uh, as a Democratic Socialist, the only Democratic Socialist on the Emeryville City Council, I look after the underdog, and it's been my work to make sure that those who don't have representation on the city council are heard. I'm from Brooklyn as well.
When coming over, because of the layout, large windows, exposure to street and walk traffic, high walk score right next to Bay Street, I believed it to welcome the opportunity for businesses that were um, that had the intention of providing services to the community, um, primarily the residents here at the Emory first, which meant my doors are open to the public. I because I've had a salon for 20 years, I already knew what that looked like with the permits that are required. However, I've never been in a live workspace. So combining the residential and business didn't didn't give me like an extra layer of requirements. It just was a benefit to be combine the two. So with the large windows, with the 800, 500 tenants here, for me it was to be open, face for the community, allow customers to come in, provide a service to them, and definitely prepare for that exchange, that commerce, or that patronage of my business.
Well, you're also in real estate. So what would you say the units are zone commercial, but in the lease they are resident. So can you talk a little bit about, is that standard, or is there some gray area, or does that create a gray area with the live work program?
Yes, it definitely creates a gray area. When you have a commercial lease, it's a little different. It's a lot different than a residential lease. There's more protections in residential lease, which in our case, there is some benefit to that. However, the gray line with commercial is that for us in the live workspace, we're not looked at as commercial to the point where we can fully activate and provide a service from a business point of view, not from the residential point of view. So the gray line is just a matter of legalities and pairing up with the city who determines what those restrictions are and making the tenant aware of it. You don't provide a space and no one understands what those restrictions are and requirements are because it's not written up as a commercial space. It's written up as a residential space. So we have the commercial on this side and we have the residential on this side. The commercial is the area that seems to bring the most problems because it's zoned for a business. It's zoned for you to activate the space within the realm of your business. But you also um, if you also bring in the residential part of it, there's some requirements and rules around that as well. There's a pain gap there. There's a misunderstanding, and there's a a gray area where not even the city, I feel, has um, figured that out. And so it comes on us as the tenants combining our household, our residential part, and trying to manage our business when in fact no one really knows that gray line. And so we're figuring it out on our own. I know Emeryville has other live work environments, but are they like this? Do they have the large storefront windows? Are they customer facing? No, these are more commercial spaces for activation and e-commerce and economic growth, but we don't have the support on the commercial side. If that answers your question.
It does. Councilmember, would you like to chime in on that in terms of like the city and the live work program is a city program, isn't
Mhm.
it? And so, what would you say looks like the issue here?
Well, so it has to do with bad planning. And these sort of retail sort of storefronts is something that when we're looking at building new properties, we were advised, consulted, and essentially copy and pasted what is very popular now when you're building a lot of these new developments, and that is you have a luxury rate apartments, and then you mix in some affordable housing, and then you have these retail storefronts. So these retail storefronts were relatively empty for quite some time. And so there was an opportunity to create live work spaces that would be built into retail. However, we never updated our code. And so our live work spaces typically were not retail. So here we have this opportunity, this space that needs to be filled in terms of live workspace that needs to be filled. However, the conditions to to make sure that they're sustainable aren't there when it comes to how the code is designed, and which means that then the code needs to modernize. The issue with Emeryville is that unless you're some sort of big developer, um, the Emeryville tends to not err on the side of small businesses or even tenants, and so that tends to be the issue. It's a culture of, of preferring for homeowners and developers to have the last say, and that's one of the reasons why ADUs were the focus of our tenant or of our tenant protections. No, I'm sorry. The AD it's the reason why ADUs were the focus of our housing committee for nearly 2 years.
Say what an ADU is?
Also, ADU is an accessible dwelling unit, which means building homes sort of in your backyard. That was a focus of our housing committee, while our rents were skyrocketing, and to the point where now Emeryville is the sixth most expensive city in California. And it's California. We have a lot of cities. And so how does that happen? And that's because we didn't address problems. We had a prioritization of certain policies that were coming from Sacramento as to how these buildings are built and what is the focus. And the focus has not been on small businesses and on rental tenant protections.
And so, can you also talk a little bit about there was something that just passed for small businesses that you were very much involved with, I think even spearheaded. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how it fits into the mission and vision of Emeryville?
Yes. So during COVID, I saw a lot of small businesses suffer from a lack of initiative from City Hall. It's one of the reasons why I ran for office. Small businesses carried my election campaign signs because I was focused on how do we support you, and I would go to the small businesses, everything from the from a bar to the Korean nail shop, and that I wanted to hear what is it that we can do to support them. And it was interesting. A lot of them weren't talking about money. They were actually saying, well, there's certain policies, licensing. There were things that the city was doing that was getting in the way of them being able to grow and prosper. And so when I became council member, I focused on that, and particularly around Black and Brown businesses. They wanted it to be BIPOC. I was told I was cool with that, but their focus on small businesses was minute compared to a broader vision that I had as to how do we make sure that businesses aren't shut down and closed down? How do we start looking at them and what resources that we can provide to them rather than looking the other way and say, well, the business is surviving on its own. Because that's a policy that has nothing to do with the will of the people. The will of the people in Emeryville is that they want these small businesses to thrive because those are the small businesses that they have a connection to. However, the small businesses that do thrive are the ones that are usually attached to some sort of big developer. And unfortunately, that is how we've run the show. And so when I pushed for a BIPOC small business initiative, that was something that really changed the conversation, shifted the conversation towards what can we do to support our small businesses, and as particularly small businesses that are operated by people of color, or, BIPOC population, and are serving BIPOC communities.
That's very interesting. I know that Gavin Newsom just passed something. It's like a B. I don't know. Are you familiar with getting rid of these blanketed terms like BIPOC and POC to really specifically focus in on communities
Mm.
as their communities. Did you see a history of maybe Black and Brown businesses being overlooked, not getting funding? I mean, what really stood out to you to say, hey, we need to focus in on these businesses?
Mhm.
What was it? Because I know that Gavin passed that for a specific reason,
Yeah.
because based on my research, trying to even find where funding went was hard because everything's in a BIPOC POC that just doesn't say anything.
Mhm.
So can you talk a little bit about how that impacts those blanketed terms impact small businesses that are owned and operated by um, melanated people?
Mhm. Small businesses and tenants, residential tenants, are sometimes facing the same problems, which is displacement and gentrification. That when problems arise, the city sort of takes a step back and lets them sort of figure it out. But they're figuring it out with landlords and big developers who don't have the best interest at heart for a lot of these businesses and a lot of these tenants as well. And so the state of California doesn't really have a concept of what a public advocate is. New York City, where I'm from, has an office of the public advocate. And so the people really pushed for someone to say, hey, we need some sort of representation. Because we don't have that in the state of California, then I have focused on being a public advocate. And so I've studied public advocacy in concrete ways. And that's how the BIPOC Small Business Initiative was birthed. And,
And I like to add, so on the flip side of this line, I have the business, the real estate business. And my goal is essentially to do that, is to support the tenants and the owners to maintain their asset and the tenants to have a safe place to live. So my work is providing this service. It's actually a love language for me. So it's emotional, and I'm a renter. I've been a renter, and I notice that there's no support between the owner and the tenant until it gets to evictions, until it gets to, habitability. But just on a basic, everyday um, enjoyment of this environment of my home, you need someone in between. You need me as a property manager to say, hey, owner, that's not okay. Or hey, tenant, look, make sure you keep your registration up to date, or don't use your car as a storage on the owner's property. Those little subtle um, mundane things need attention, and who's gonna bring that attention to the owners or the tenant? The tenants left to figure it out. The management, the owners are like, I don't want to deal with it. So who do we go to? Who as a tenant in the live workspace? Who do I go to?
Well, that brings me to my next question. You started the Emory Merchants Association,
Yes.
and so can you talk a little bit about why you started that, and really what did you see happening here that really made you think, hey, we need to have that in between that mediator?
Sure. It was just what we're talking about. There was no one to go to. We went to the city. The city says we can't. They don't have jurisdiction or they can't help. We go to management and they're covering their bottom line. They don't actually know the profession as a property manager or as a realtor to even be in a position to give proper advice and help. They're coming from a they're coming from a business, major corporations, they're on the front line, but there's a higher power, and that higher power is the problem. They don't essentially see us as an asset to their asset. They see us as a number bringing in their rent, which is that, of course, that's what you want. But to do that, you need to provide us a service as well. So the Merchants Association acts as a buffer to the city and for residents, essentially like a tenant union. And except I came in as a merchant, so I wanted it to focus on the merchants because the merchants were, when I came in, we were the ones having the issues. And so we'll expand that to include all of the tenants, because what we want to do is make sure the tenants are being heard. We want to make sure if there's a problem that all the tenants are having, that we collectively represent that problem, not just me, not just you, not just the other tenant, not just the other merchant. We want to collectively bring these issues to the city by way of the Merchants Association, and also to the owners of the building, not management, because I have experienced management is not very helpful. They are helpful to the level that they can. And again, it goes back to professional ethics. It goes back to habitability. There's a whole, you know, group of issues that management on the front line are not skilled to manage. Therefore, who do we continue going, spending our time, spending our wills, going back and forth to management when they're saying the same thing? Do we continue to go to Emeryville, the city of Emeryville alone, or do we put the strength in numbers and then we say, hey, this is a problem that we're all having. We're going to channel it through the Merchants Association, and then we would like our voices to be heard. We would like solutions. We would like advocacy, because we're not getting that. And so that came from a space of frustration. And hey, who do we talk to? I'm very thankful that I've met Mr. Price, but me coming to him representing everyone is the goal. We all can't flood the Emeryville, uh, the Emory or the city of Emeryville with our issues. So let's channel it through the appropriate measure, which would be now the Merchants Association. So it's in the beginning stages, but I do feel confident that we will make an impact for us and future businesses in the Emory, and in all of the live workspaces.
What about the yo-yoing? So it seems like the city, like you were saying before, the city is like hands off, like, we're that's not our problem. Then you have the management, which is in partnership with the city, who's also saying, hey, it's not our problem either. But where does the responsibility really lie?
Very good question.
When a person decides to jump classes when they decide, hey, I make enough money, I want to buy a home and maybe two homes eventually, and rent out one of the homes, and then they become a landlord. That is an amazing relationship because eventually that renter, they may buy a home, and and so that has really been how things have worked in this country. Then came the major corporations, and the major corporations say, hey, let's buy 10,000 homes.
Yes.
In order to do something like that, you have had to have a lot of politicians in your pocket, shaping policies, shaping what cities can even do. Emeryville, unfortunately, kowtows to the corporation. And that's one of the reasons why we have EMA, the Emory Merchants Association. It's the reason why we have Emory Rising, the city's first citywide tenant union, because we who aren't the big corporations are being squashed and are making the big decisions. So I believe that if the live work spaces were occupied by some of these corporations, there wouldn't be an issue. But that's not what's happening. And so I think that the city is really good at punting these issues to management. And then management then punts the issue to Emeryville. And this back and forth, what it does is that it exhausts that small business or that tenant, and then eventually they are displaced or gentrified. And that's what I'm trying to prevent by giving them a voice on the city council and helping them understand how policy and legislation works for the city of Emeryville, and encouraging them to join these committees before they hit the dais. And my colleagues and I are looking at what the staff recommendations are.
Would you say that, or what are your thoughts around small businesses according to the mission and vision of the city of Emeryville? Are they an asset to the city of Emeryville? Are more of a corporate presence, is that more of an asset to the city of Emeryville? Because we're seeing a whole lot more corporate presence and less small business presence. And is that happening for a reason?
I have a comment on that. We have our place. We as small business owners, we have our place just as well as the large corporations have our place. I'm not Target, but there's a Target here, and it's very beneficial to the residents and anybody in this area, passing transit or not. What we are here to do is to maintain community, maintain a resource, a familiar face as a resource. When I open my doors, I don't intend to only serve a selected few. I'm welcoming everyone. Target doesn't only serve their corporate stakeholders or higher ups. They service everyone. So we equally. I'm not sure if it's equally, but we have a place um, um, to live in this space together. It's just unfortunate that Emeryville values the larger corporations more than the small business. And I don't know where that comes from. I've been an entrepreneur all of my life. So my family is an entrepreneur. I come from generations of entrepreneurs. So to expect that to ever go away or to not support it, it's you know we have to think about that. What does that look like? Well, how can we preserve this entrepreneur spirit, because we do provide to our community. We are wanted. We bring a, additional layer of hospitality, which is what we've always done, generations, centuries, and just from the beginning of the time, we open our doors to merchants and people for trade, and we want to continue doing that. we don't want Target to away, and so you shouldn't want us to go away. We should be able to work in tandem and have the same support and the same leverage and the same accessibility to remaining important.
So you are a resident here and you are a small business. Once upon a time, you used to pay a lease for your business and a lease for your home. Can you talk about the how sustainable this live work program is, even though it does these units at the Emory may not reflect traditional live work units, but can you talk about the benefit of being able to combine both your business and your work?
Sure, it's a huge benefit. It not only reduces overhead, but it allows me to remain active and aware of everything going on with the business. I'm the face of it. I'm here. I don't have to travel somewhere else to live because I'm here. So I make it an extra special place because I have to combine the two, which means I have to always have a cleaner to come and make my place look decent for anybody that may want to walk through the door. It's been a great experience because I am able to be here versus being in two places. Being in Emeryville, as we mentioned earlier, it's very expensive. So I need to have my return as well. I need to be treated fairly. I need to, allow my voice to be heard if I am giving you my hard earned money to combine both my living and my housing, which are my living and my business, which for me are very, very, very two important things in my life and has been before I came to the Emory. And so when I come here, I don't want it to be different. I want it to be even better because it's a luxury environment. I'm still able to be in my home where I grew up in. My family is still around. So I need the return of my investment as well. And for corporate and the city of Emeryville to understand that, maybe we just need to be more vocal. And this is why I joined this conversation because that's what needs to happen. We need to be vocal in what this means to us, which is this is my livelihood. This I can't just get up and go because you don't want to take care of your things or the building. I have to make this work for me.
Mhm. Do you have any comments?
When do we start talking about economic mobility for low opportunity communities? We don't, not policy wise in the city of Emeryville. When we were thinking about our strategic plan, none of it was about affordability. They were about developing the 40th Street. That is not our focus. And so there's a racial component in that because traditionally, typically, who are the low opportunity communities? And I say who rather than what are the low opportunity communities. And the who are mostly Black and brown folk, but especially Black folk. When we develop these policies, the racial component is there. The Live Work Space program was designed for white artists. We only have one co op throughout the entire city, white artists mostly. And that is unfortunately how Emeryville is organized because those white artists, they rallied together and they said, we want a seat at the table. And ever since, we can have these open discussions, but behind closed doors, we're talking about, well, what is it that we can do to satisfy the art community? Even when we market Emeryville, we say it's art and innovation. Well, why art? Well, because of the art community and the organized. So why is it that small businesses and residential tenants don't have the same leeway? It's because we aren't organized. We're not striking. We're not showing up to city council. Are we even aware of how city council works? So I think that When we organize, we win. And we win by saying, hey, we are here too. And we want to make sure that our voice is counted, is considered, is heard when you are making some of these big decisions.
And for me, when my housing and my business is on the line, that's all I have. That's what I spent the last 20 years of my life perfecting. So I need an outlet. I need to be heard. And I speak when I say I, it's really we. It's not just me because my family is entrepreneurs. Behind me, when I'm not here anymore, my son, my niece, my nephew will probably still be in Emeryville, and we need to make that pathway better for them. So I don't take those two parts of my life lightly. Gone that we've experienced that for how many years? I'm just going to say 400. But it still exists. It's still happening. It happened to you. If this was 1945, what do you think would have happened to your business?
It would have been burnt down.
Or you would have been
lynched,
maybe in
hanging from a tree.
Maybe in 1921.
I mean, this is not new to us. However, it's very surprising and concerning that it is happening right here in Emeryville, where a place where I grew up, a place where I raised my son. It was very hurtful for me to see you go through that. Not because you are a family, but because you are a business owner, because you are melanated, and because this has been years in the making. This is something we've seen over and over. Tesla, right here in San Francisco. When do we let the ops know we can't continue that way? You're not going to hang me from the tree. You're not going to burn my building down, and you're not going to threaten me and bully me to where I move. Where are you going to go? Where would you put this beautiful space? Where would I put my space? I've always selected very nice areas for my salon. This is just another one along my list. Where do you want me to go if you don't want me to be here? Where do your neighbors want you to go? Where would they prefer to see your thriving business? We have to recognize that we still have those bad actors. However, we need to just be vocal and say, hey, not today. Hey, those days are gone. Hey, you move. If this is not a comfortable environment for you, I'm doing what the city wants me to do. I'm here because I was allowed to be here. I signed a lease just like you. The only difference is you're not offering a business to the community, whether it's art or not. Why can't we get along? Why can't we cohabit? Why can't we share this space? Why does it have to be you attacking me? Why? Because we've seen it before. This is nothing new. This is unfortunately what bad actors do. And so I don't know if it'll ever be eliminated. However, our place is to partner and to bring our voice to the table and to rally and to say, not today.
Complaints are heard and complaints are taken into consideration depending on what the city planning is. This is a city planning issue. When the 40th Street merchants got together and asked me to participate in a session where they would share the issues that they had about development along 40th Street, I saw what the plan was for 40th Street prior to street closures. And then they added street closures. And those street closures mean that many of those businesses would lose the foot traffic that they thrive on. And many of these businesses carried Emeryville during the pandemic and have been here for several decades. I remember when city staff came to that same session and they were really surprised to see me. And they had a truck, a semi, navigate some of the proposed changes that they wanted to make. And the semi truck couldn't do it. It would actually back up traffic. And then one of the merchants said, well, we don't see how this is going to work. And the city staff member said, well, this will all be housing anyway. In order for it to be housing, that means that these businesses will have to shut down and move. These businesses are making complaints. Are they being listened to? No. And many of these business owners are not black and brown. Many of them are white. Many of them are Jewish. Many of them but their workers are black and brown. That's one of the reasons why I focused on BIPOC. It's not just the owners, but it's also the workers. Those complaints aren't being listened to, but the complaints of your neighbors are. Why is that? And so I think that this selective listening is happening from a policy and legislative standpoint. Why is it that several small businesses can be affected by a bike lane when the bike lane has their own lobby and public comments? Many of those public comments are not from people who live in Emeryville. And these businesses aren't really being listened to. Even if it's affecting senior citizens, and the senior citizens are, they have wheelchairs and they're coming to City Hall and they're saying, this affects us. And the city turns a blind eye. So it is not by accident. It is very intentional.
And another thing, when does the excessive complaints raise a concern? From my direct discussion with the city is, again, that hands off, that's not our jurisdiction. But it should be. There should be someone to not necessarily investigate, but to uh, raise a concern. Let's go out. Let's get the merchants together. Let's see where these complaints are coming from. Not one time did we all sit down in 2026 and have a conversation and have share our ideas. It was his separate meetings with the neighbors. The neighbors going to the city, and to trump the complaints as they did should have raised a red flag to the city officials. Like, wait a minute, why is this? What is happening? Why are all these complaints coming in? Well, their response to that was to come make their visits, see that you're in compliance, um, allow them to continue submitting false and their own narrative about your business. When does the city come? Why do we have to go to court? We have a whole city hall right here. We have members that should be able to say, let's meet at this time and let's talk about these complaints that you're filing on your neighbor, so it won't escalate. It escalated, and it did not need to escalate. We are not living where we have to send a message through a boat to reach Asia. We can talk to our neighbors. We can pick up a phone. My son says this all the time. How many wars could have been avoided had we just had a telephone back in the day when we can just immediately talk to someone? Well, we have that. We're 5 steps away. We're 20 feet away from the city. Why did it escalate? Where is that support? Where is that person in the city that says, wait a minute, these, yes, you can make complaints, but when it's obsessive and uh, the truth behind it is a false narrative, it did not have to reach that level. So again, this is why we exist. This is why he's implementing some changes, and there needs to be some initiatives that are measured and the solutions are measurable.
Can we talk about these complaints?
Yes.
So I met with some of your neighbors, and I said, okay, so I got the document, I got the email. Tell me what's the issue? What really is the issue? And so they said, well, it's like it's food licensing, and these are and so the county. And I said, wait a minute. Why are you concerned with whatever is happening within this space? Because you are mostly artists, right? That'd be like us going into your studio and saying, well, what kind of acrylic paint are you using? Oh, you know what? This is actually pretty ugly, right? I don't think you should sell this, right? We're not doing that. So why are you going into whether or not she's got this license and that sort of thing? The complaints are very interesting because when I kept asking questions, the real issues were coming up. And so the some of the more technical concerns weren't really capturing the motives. And that's when it becomes much more cultural bias. I heard, well, it's the people going in and out. It's the foot traffic. It's the increased foot traffic. It's the music that we're hearing. It's the sitting of the tables outside, the places of the tables outside, that sort of thing. And I said, well, have you ever lived around that? Have you ever lived around a concentration of black and brown, as you say, melanated people? Well, no. And they go, okay, well, I'm from Brooklyn. And especially when it's warm outside, we sit on the stoop and we have a good time talking to each other and conversing with one another. I also went to school in Italy, and Italian culture has the same thing. They call it the fontano. And so at the fountain, everyone gathers, everyone, the grandparents, kids, all of them. They gather so that they can keep each other updated. Some of it gossip, some of it what's happening in politics. And then the grandparents leave, they go to bed, and the young people then go to a nightclub or go to a park or something like that, right? But that community gathering is happening. And no one is pushing back in Italy, in Italian culture. But when it's black and brown folk, people have an issue. And especially when you're talking about noise, especially when you're talking about it. So it seems like these issues are sensory. Your senses are being agitated because your senses have been attuned to largely Anglo-Saxon ways of expression and gathering and getting together. Because, yeah, if the English were in charge of Italians, yeah, there would be no Fontano. And so I think that some of these complaints really, when you press, really don't make it. And it's interesting that some of these complaints would never even survive in Oakland or in other cities, but they do here in Emeryville, because once again, our city planning is focused on benefiting the big corporations. But then what happened when several of those same artists, when they were being lead poisoned by Wareham, and they also came to me for help and support, and I fought for them as well. But the city then went to Wareham and said, okay, you're kind of doing something wrong. We're going to fine you, but not that much. But you can keep doing what you're doing. And so, many of those artists were pretty upset, as they should be. And I worked with them in order for the city to find a way to work with them. And that's one of the reasons why we have legislation for temporary relocation assistance, so that anytime you are being removed from your unit, then that tenant has to be compensated. So we have permanent relocation assistance. So if you're permanently displaced, meaning that you're not coming back to the city, then we say, okay, you get a certain amount of money, that sort of thing. The problem is that the temporary is used to push folks out to the point where they eventually leave. But then landlord doesn't have to pay the permanent relocation assistance. So now, if there's a flooding, if there's any issue happening, that is definitely not the fault of the tenant. The landlord has to pay the tenant to stay at a hotel and be dislocated for a while, and then when they return, that is they're compensated. Their rent may be cut in half, or they're just directly compensated by 2-3 times their rent. That temporary relocation assistance program happened because of those artists complaining to me. And so, how is it that these same artists are now talking about displacing some of our folks here in Emeryville? It doesn't sound like being good neighbors. And that is why I'm focused on pushing legislation to protect our communities, protect small merchants. And whether it's going to be 40th Street, whether it's the Emery, whether it's Bay Street, wherever there is pocket low opportunities in Emeryville, I'm going to be on the side of the people, always.
So am I.
One, one last question, because that was great.
That was great.
So what does this mean for Kayinde and her business? You being a realtor, you being a council member, what is this? What are the next step for her? Should she stay here? Does she have to move? What does this mean from your perspective and from your career's background?
I always tell my tenants, you don't move. Do you have a better place to go? Go. But if it's an issue within your unit, let's fix the issue, because when you leave, someone else is going to come behind you, and that issue is still going to remain. Why spin our wheels? Fix the issue. No, I tell you, I've been your largest champion. No, you don't move. You fix it. Not for you, but the generations behind you. Do you want someone else to come in here? Similar to what happened with the neighbor a few doors down. She came in and she left. But she should not have had to leave. That's her business, that's her housing. Let's fix the issues. No, don't leave. No, my tenants, if there's a problem, let me fix it. Owner, this is a problem for the tenant. We have to fix it. I don't patch it up. I don't ignore the complaints. I don't ignore the responsibility. It's something I have to do. And yes, the owners always fight me on it, but my job is not only to protect you, but it's to protect the tenant.
I'm not your typical council member. I mean, I have a council member's belly. That usually comes from prolonged sitting and stress.
Yes.
But this, no, you don't see this in the state of California.
No.
Even when it comes to being a black man. And it's so interesting because our country was founded by a bunch of long-haired idealists who were also slave owners. But, when these kind of things come to my desk, I think a lot about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. I was raised by Buddhist monks, in New York. Most of my education came from New York City, Chinatown. And so Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was this activist, educator and activist who came from the Dalit people. And it's really interesting to look at the Dalit people who used to be called the untouchables, because you're talking about systemic inequality that has lasted centuries upon centuries, where how these people were being treated and kept poor was just built in. That was how it was, to the point where you had to cleanse yourself if you happen to be a black man. And it's so interesting because our country was founded by a bunch of long-haired idealists who were also slave owners. But, when these kind of things come to my desk, I think a lot about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. I was raised by Buddhist monks, yeah, in New York. Most of my education came from New York City, Chinatown. And so Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was this activist, educator and activist who came from the Dalit people. And it's really interesting to look at the Dalit people who used to be called the untouchables, because you're talking about systemic inequality that has lasted centuries upon centuries, where how these people were being treated and kept poor was just built in. That was how it was, to the point where you had to cleanse yourself if you happen to walk and you were in the shadow of a Dalit. And so Dr. B.R. Bedkar, he was my hero, even before I learned about Malcolm X. He says, educate, organize, and agitate. And so that's what I suggest, is that we educate the public, we organize all of these merchants, all these throughout the city, because if we organize all the merchants, we outnumber the artists. And we agitate. We keep coming back to the council. We make as much noise as possible so people know what's happening in Emeryville. So that when Emeryville is getting all these awards for our bike lanes and for the tall buildings that we're building, that people are also asking, yeah, but I'm hearing some weird things happening in Emeryville. And it's only when we start educating, organizing, and agitating that you start to see that shift in how we develop policy. That's the only way it works, is that you make the powers that be uncomfortable, embarrass them, and even challenge them when it's time to reelect them. And I think that united, we can never be defeated.